And I was asked to come and talk about some of these ideas rather kind of late in the agenda, as the agenda was being put together. So we sort of were brainstorming this as to how useful this could be in the region. And so we've been working in Africa. We've also started working in Asia as well. And so we thought maybe I'll just talk a bit about some of the things we're doing and why we're doing it. And then we'll just get some discussions going. But particularly, I think both Clemens and Olivier have been working quite a bit in some of the country case studies, the Yemen, as well as even at the regional. So we thought we could bring in some of the work they've already done to illustrate a little bit of some of the things that could be done. And what we're really talking about here is more about this collaboration and sharing of data tools, research capacities at a regional level, as already we're doing at this event. A lot of you are coming from different backgrounds. Some are from research, some are from policy analysis, others are from data systems, whether it's statistical bureaus I work with maybe, or even in the policy area in the ministries or other areas. And the key issue is, well, first maybe, to give you a little outline of what I'll talk about briefly. I'll try to go through this, and I'm trying to time myself for 10 minutes, so if I've got 2 or 3 minutes left, someone can let me know. First of all, I'll just talk a little bit about motivation and context, translating evidence into action, part of the real purpose of why we're doing it, application examples in Africa and Asia, as I mentioned, and then Olivier will come in with an example for the MENA region. Yeah. All right. When we think about translating evidence into action, we're really talking about this link between research and the policy front, bridging that. And this tends to be weak. We all know the different capacities that exist on both sides of that link. On the supply side, obviously, the capacity to generate sufficient, relevant, and credible research is critical. But on the demand side, also the capacity among policymakers to absorb it is also very important. How do we make that link between the two? Research, including data collection analysis, tend to suffer a lot of times from just a shortage of attention and resources. We see that in many countries. They just don't pay much attention, put much effort into collecting data. Knowledge sharing is often very minimal with different agencies, sometimes carrying out parallel overlapping. Sometimes data surveys are actually ongoing, different ministries, and they're not talking together, and then, so accessing data can be very challenging. Data and knowledge can be politically contentious and viewed with distrust unless they support the status quo, and we see that quite a bit in this region as well. Yet there's some potential in starting to, under those conditions, in the whole region, there's some underlying commonalities, these common challenges that exist. How can we try to learn how to improve some of this? How do we bring that research closer to the policy, given the policy landscape in the region? There are certain similarities, biophysical, climatic, socioeconomic. There are also political and social ties that exist in the region, but also quite a lot of variations. There are also some that are very contentious. There's some common problems that are on food security, emerging issues that they have to deal with, such as the global trends in prices. Diversities in stages of economic development obviously also exist. There's also variations in the state of poverty and food security. The depth of it is quite different, and even within a country. Research and technical capacities across countries can also vary quite a bit. The level of how much universities are involved and engaged, but also how much research is being done in the area of food security. The knowledge base and data systems, as I was mentioning, there is a lot of variability in that, even in terms of standards. What sort of measurement standards are they using? And the quality that exists across. Why am I talking about all the variations and as well as similarities? Well, it's to see that there's actually some value in starting to share a little bit of this across countries. If people can learn from mistakes that other countries are doing, but they can also help with capacity. If one country has been able to solve a problem, they can also help with translating some of that lesson for other countries to take on. But also, when we start looking at this regional entity of how we can try to learn from each other, it's also generating public goods. And as researchers, we all want to do that. Evidence-based dialogue and knowledge sharing among researchers, particularly involving practitioners as well, and policymakers in that dialogue starts helping us to contribute more towards really making a difference in moving research into the policy action arena. Regional global platforms for exchange of knowledge, data tools, can encourage greater collaboration and coordination with development partners who have resources and can therefore bring that to bear in that sort of effort of collaboration. The outputs and sharing of lessons, the practice and data through working papers, policy briefs, I think become especially attractive when we engage our local partners to collaborate with as co-authors and in producing some of the results. Now, when do we manage to see success in terms of how research gets into the process? Well, a lot of times people see it as accidental or it's just purposeful, so long as there is a policy window of opportunity. I think that's been an experience in many cases. It supports a political viewpoint, then it's usually taken up. It helps support what the government wants to do. In many ways, though, because it's only taken in that sense, research can have a very marginal effect. Very rarely will it really get into the policy action unless it is acceptable, or if it's only focusing on a particularly less contentious, like political instrument, what measurement of a subsidy or what type of policy margin should be selected. It is communicated well and understood, obviously through policy briefs and also through the dialogue that's presented. And also, most importantly, not only is it credible, but it's relevant. It's relevant to the policy questions policymakers are asking, and they want answers, and therefore you're bringing it in at the right time. And therefore, it really requires us as researchers, if we're going to make a difference and try to get this into the process, that we understand the policy landscape, the process that's involved. And this not only involves just the social aspects, because we have a lot of actors, individuals involved in this and how you're interacting. There needs to be a good understanding of how people can engage and work together. But there's also politics. There are power relations and ideas involved. We need to understand how those act. Who are the most influential? Who should we engage with? There's obviously human behavior, and we see that quite a lot in any part of the world. It's not just in the Arab region. They're rooted in people. They have vested interests, and so there tends to be some encouragement for corruption. So now, how do we get into this landscape? How do we now get involved in this? And what we've tried to do in Africa, and we're now just launching this in Asia, is trying to get in the middle of it. And this I put down there called Boundary Actor Network, right in the center of three main themes. First one is you've got your leadership in government right at the top, and then you have this process that takes place in the policy process. So the planning, the implementation, the monitoring and evaluation. I think we're all very familiar with that. And we all know, even though it's trying to look linear, we put it in a circle here because it really is not linear. It's an interactive sort of process. And then you've got people that interact in all this. Whoa, I'm going to move really fast now. So how do you engage both the researchers, the green circle, the purple, the civil society, the local practitioners, the private sector, and as well as farmers, and then the government at the very top. So we're talking about some sort of boundary actor network where we bring these people together and we bring evidence. And what we were proposing in Africa and what we've been working there is doing some strategic analysis on policy issues that can communicate very well with this diverse group of individuals. So it comes to how you package the research results, how you visualize them using different media to get that information across and get the dialogue going. And then how you put that within a knowledge system in order to always have ongoing dialogue, whether it's through a web portal or also through, most importantly, these conferences, such as the one we're at right now. It allows the human contact and the interaction to take place. So the example I'm giving in Africa is something we called, fancy name of Strategic Analysis and Knowledge Support System, SACS for short. This was at the country level. This quickly came on at the regional level with the CADEP process, which is a comprehensive African agricultural development program under the Africa Union, where they wanted to have support in bringing evidence into that process of implementation. And we then have launched that, and building on that experience are now starting in Asia. But in this case, starting with a conference we had last year in November, engaging our partners to get some interest in what they're looking for. And we're building a lot of our background and work and experience in Africa on this model but just in the starting phase in Asia. So we know there's going to be a lot of differences and demands that come in for that. I will not go through too much into detail on the Africa model, but one of the things we're using are tools on the website where people can come in and view the kind of trends on key indicators for agriculture as well as food security and growth. And we also delve down into the country and try to see how that country is meeting up to the same sort of objectives as other countries they're sharing. In RESX, we launched the conference in Nepal and was very successful in bringing together a lot of different stakeholders, a lot of excitement around the kind of lessons the countries are facing right now, both in Central Asia, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. We have since launched a web portal that we're now just still in its beta version. But in this case, we're trying to bring the regional context in terms of how each of the countries compare and contrast in dealing with food security in the region. And we do this at the sub-regional. We do this also at the country level. And as I was mentioning before, the visualization also becomes critical. And we want to make some of these products available for people to download and be able to also use in their presentations within their own country context. And so we've been working on some infographics as well that show some key trends on the hunger index, where that country stands. We also look at GDP growth, what's been happening over the past year, how do they compare, value added per worker, what are the returns to labor, which is a big issue in the region, what is going on with yields, cereal yields as well. And then finally, a big issue in Central Asia, remittances. As we see in the case of Tajikistan, almost 40% of the country's own GDP is from remittances alone. What are some of the lessons out of this early work we've been having? Well, we definitely find that networking and dialogue with local policymakers and the different groups makes a real big difference. That's essential during these early stages to get buy-in, to get ownership and the value of what we're creating. Having local champions has also been a very, very important at driving at impact on how implementation of these efforts take place, especially in terms of forming an advisory steering committee that involves key stakeholders in the region. Stronger ties with local partner institutions and government, I cannot even stress that enough, but I think that is so critical if you're going to get enough participation and involvement and excitement around the kind of work already going on in the region to contribute to it. And the ability to maintain quality products produced in close collaboration with our local partners is definitely essential. Finally, and also the multi-donor support becomes very critical. None of these things can go without resources, but having a single donor has usually been more difficult than having multi-donor support. And that's because it gives us more of an opportunity to really work towards the public good nature rather than for interest of one donor. And in this, I will pass now to Olivia to present some example for MENA